Hello, friend. Welcome to another episode where I don't have enough time to edit, so I hope I'm eloquent enough the first time. We're talking about the Millionaire Fastlane in this video. Why? Because, well, I read it recently, and honestly, I used to tell people to basically read a group of 4 different finance books that all has sort of different points of view so that they could figure out where they lied within those 4. And then I always felt like, but they don't tell the whole story even all together. So ultimately go also like listen to this guy's podcast. And it was a complicated thing. Now it's really simple. I just tell people to read this book because it's the best personal finance book I've ever read. And you could argue it's not totally a personal finance book. It's really more of a how to actually achieve wealth, no nonsense guide, which ultimately is what people want, right? Like we can go to a Dave Ramsey or something and be like, oh, help me with my debt. But like, do you really care about your debt or do you care about being wealthy? Probably the second one. Now, the debt might be the thing in the way or that you think is in the way, or that might be the thing that's causing you the most stress right now. But ultimately, that's not really what you want. What you really want is to be free from the binds of just being in a bad spot with your finances. So this book is great for several reasons. Overall, I don't want to waste your time. So who's this book for? Anybody who wants to live a wealthy life, and let me define wealthy life. Wealthy life is where you spend less time doing things that other people force you to do and more time doing what you see as fulfilling. So whether that means at 35 years old, you get to spend all your time with your kids and you don't have to have a day job, or if to you, that means that you spend all of your time working on something you're passionate about, like your art, instead of having to have that sales job that you hate. That is how we're defining wealth, ultimately being able to buy back your time, because time is a non-renewable resource. You can always make more money. You can't always create more time. In fact, you can never create more time, really. I mean, I guess you could argue that you could do better diet and exercise and eat better is diet. But like, I don't know, theoretically you could do that to extend your life. But even that, you never know, right? Some people smoke and live to 100. So ultimately, however much time we have on this planet, we can't really change that. Certainly, if Five for Fighting has anything to say for it, we only have 100 years to live. And honestly, most of us have less than 100 years to live. So how do we make the most of the time we do have here? That's really what this book is about. And then this book is about how to get there. I get that it has a clickbaity title. Honestly, if I saw this in the store, I probably would roll my eyes and be like, I bet that's a bunch of garbage. But it's great. So first caveat is you might not like this book if you are sensitive, because he is sometimes a little bit harsh and makes fun of the other side, which to me, as somebody who agrees with him, I think is fair and appropriate. But I could see how somebody would take it personally that, for example, he makes fun of the slow laners or the slow lane itself. It would be easy to take that personally when a lot of human beings are simply in the slow lane. So just real quick, there's basically 3 lanes. There's the sidewalk, there's the slow lane, and there's the fast lane. About half of the book or more is dedicated to the fast lane, because ultimately the other 2 lanes are really just explained to say like, hey, this is what those are. You're probably in them. Now let me explain the better way, which is the Millionaire Fastlane. So the sidewalk is basically anybody who's paycheck to paycheck, has a net worth of around 0, and is effectively one step from, living on an actual sidewalk, which is probably a decent amount of Americans, unfortunately, who are living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of Americans, those studies keep coming out where I think it's 75% of Americans couldn't pay for a $1,000 emergency if it came up that month, which is crazy to me. But anyway, that would be a sidewalker. A slow laner is your sort of traditional middle class, upper middle class type person who invests in their 401k, puts in their 20%, and will probably retire comfortably at 55 if they're lucky, probably more like 60, and then they will play golf until they die, which is sort of the way that he would talk about it. So if you're ticked off that I worded it that way, you're probably not going to like this book, because he kind of pokes fun at it like that. The whole like, oh yeah, good for you. You sacrificed your entire life so that you could play golf for 10 years and then your life be over. So ultimately, I could see his tone rubbing some people the wrong way. I think it's worth pushing through it, even if you don't like it, because he has so much good stuff in here. I just want to talk about probably the 2 biggest takeaways for me. And one is something I've wanted to talk about for a while. He does poke fun at other financial gurus for something that I think does need to be talked about. Now, I appreciate Dave Ramsey for what he is and Robert Kiyosaki for what he is. I don't even appreciate Susie Orman. I'm not even going to pretend. But something he points out here, which I think is pretty legitimate, is a lot of people will follow people's advice that those people themselves didn't achieve their wealth by following that advice. So, for example, does Dave Ramsey's baby steps and plan work to get out of debt? Yeah. Does it work? Also, yes. But is that how Dave Ramsey got as wealthy as he is? No. The reason Dave Ramsey is super wealthy is because he sells his teaching. Him teaching people how to get out of debt is what made him outrageously wealthy. If you follow Dave Ramsey's plan with his baby steps, you are not going to have a $200 million net worth. You're not. It's just not going to happen. I mean, even if I've listened to a lot of Dave Ramsey, I've never heard somebody call in and say, oh yeah, I'm worth $30 million following your baby steps. Like that doesn't happen. And even if it does, really the person kind of followed the baby steps at first, or they had a super massive income and eventually leveraged it into rental properties that then helped grow that. So it wasn't just straight up doing the baby steps. So he talks about that in here. He pokes fun at some of the other gurus like that. Now, to Dave Ramsey's credit, Dave Ramsey never lies and says that his like $200-300 million net worth is from his baby steps. I do, though, I'm always uncomfortable with the fact that I feel like he doesn't clarify that basically ever. Like, hey guys, just so we're clear, my baby steps will get you out of debt. They will have you probably lead a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. You'll get to retire at 55 instead of 65, and you won't be financially strapped for your whole life. Yeah, sure. But my baby steps alone are not going to get you to a $200 million net worth and wealth. And I feel like he never says that. And I get that, like, he never claims otherwise, but I think people implicitly just see Dave Ramsey and then they see his teachings and they assume just following his teachings will get them to be Dave Ramsey. And it won't. It absolutely will not. Just mathematically, like, do the math. It's impossible unless your income is like, I don't know, 10 million a year, in which case you probably don't have a job. You own a business, which is very different and gets into what the fast lane ultimately is. So in this book, he talks about how, yes, of course, the fast lane is owning your own business. But more importantly, he outlines how not all businesses are created equal or even close. And probably my favorite part of this book overall is how simple he makes it, that it is scale times magnitude. So for example, a lot of people be like, oh, starting your own business, that's the way to wealth. So they open a hot dog shop, right? But in that case, first of all, let's take a look at magnitude, which magnitude roughly is how much profit you make per unit you sell. So the profit on every hot dog is not very big. And frankly, it has no ability to scale, right? Nobody's ever going to pay $300 for a hot dog. Nobody is ever going to pay even $20 for a hot dog. Even outside of a baseball stadium, they're probably still not going to do that. So the magnitude is fairly limited. But also the scale is limited because you have to physically make the hot dogs and you can only make hot dogs so fast. So ultimately, you're still trading your time for money. It's just in a more convoluted way than in a day job where it's usually pretty straightforward. I show up from 8 to 5 every day during the week, and then I get paid X amount of dollars. We can break it down into an hourly pay. Done. But when you own your own business, it turns into you want to make more money? Okay, you work 5 more hours or you sell more hot dogs. But at some point, you can't physically cook more hot dogs, even if you do have people who want to buy them. But if you say had a franchise like McDonald's, because you might say, well, Joseph, look at McDonald's. Or you might say, but MJ DeMarco, look at McDonald's. But that's different because that's actually a franchise model where McDonald's makes their money is not just via the like, hey, I cook a hamburger and sell it to a person. No. They have a franchise, which is a copy and paste ability to basically be like, hey, you go do the work for me and you get the benefit because you're kind of a business owner. You own a franchise. It's kind of fake business owner. It's kind of like all those MLMs or, let's be honest, pyramid schemes. Like, you're not really a business owner. They they lie to you. Like you don't own a business. That's not owning your own business, which he also talks about in here, by the way. But anyway, so that does have scale, right? Because once I create a franchise model, I can then sell it to 200 people and they're all working my franchise model and I'm making money off of it. But I'm not actually trading my time for that, right? They're trading their time for that. And of course, creating a franchise is non-trivial. So that's not exactly what he's necessarily recommending, but it's something that is an example of like, okay, the magnitude to some degree stayed the same there, but now we do have it at scale. So ultimately, scale is basically the ability to sell more units and magnitude is the profit per unit. So the best businesses tend to be ones that are online. Why? Because let's just say, for example, you are teaching a class. If you teach a class in person and you charge $100 per person to attend that class, then you're limited to how many people can fit in the classroom. Let's say just 20 can fit. So now the maximum money that you possibly could make is 100 times 20, right? So $2,000, that's it. But if you put that same thing online and sell it for $100 each, now theoretically 2 million people could attend. It's the same amount of work for you though, but now it's at scale. So websites or any sort of web app is a great example of this, right? If you sell an online course, you create the online course once, and because it's online, you can sell that to 1 million people, and it is no more work for you. In fact, unlike a physical product that you could sell online, where you do still have to make it or use the t-shirt shop or whatever Shopify or something to like print out the shirt for the person. No. With something that's online, it doesn't even cost you that, right? Because literally it's just like, oh, now here's a millionth person who has access to the online course or something like that. It could be just another user of a website, right? Maybe it's a subscription fee website. If you have 10 users or 1,000 users, really the amount of the difference in work for you is not much. And it certainly isn't times 100, although the money is times 100. So that's scale. And then magnitude, again, is just basically the profit per unit. So for an online course, the beauty of sort of online is you can get high scale and magnitude, which is usually where the most profitable businesses come from, right? Look at like all the richest people in the world right now are all people that own web apps, right? The starter of Facebook, the starter of Amazon, the starter of Tesla doesn't totally count, but Elon Musk is in a whole bunch of things, including software, right? And he got to start in software. So the reason is because you can get scale and magnitude out of that. Amazon has decent magnitude. It sells lots of expensive things, but more importantly, it has unbelievable scale, right? Unbelievable scale. Probably everybody watching this video has gotten a package from Amazon in the last 2 days. Let's be honest, probably today. So that is massive on the scale. But then on the other side, there's things like rental properties where the magnitude is pretty large, right? I buy one rental property and it probably can instantly make something like $500 in profit every single month, even though I'm not doing any more work. It's essentially like selling a subscription to a website, but it's $500 of profit per month. You could see it that way. So that's pretty big in magnitude, but there is no ability to scale, right? Because yeah, rent goes up over time, but I can't buy a building that normally would rent for say $1,000 a month and then be like, oh, it's going to be $10,000 a month now. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. I can't just increase the magnitude exponentially. So ultimately, I thought that was the most important takeaway from this book is the very simple but yet profound filter of thinking through the businesses that actually lead to wealth simply as let's look at it in terms of its capacity for scale and its capacity for magnitude. So how much money each unit, each thing you sell will actually make you, and then your ability to scale up how many units you sell without trading more of your time. Because somebody like a real estate agent who to some degree you can say has some level of scale in this or increase in magnitude, I guess, where yes, you could sell $1 million homes instead of $100,000 homes, and then your commission is way higher, even though the work might be the same. Yeah, but you're still constrained by how much time you have, right? So anyway, I thought that was the most important part of the book. He also talks about sort of the 5 basic business models that achieve some good version of that. And the 2 I remember are the 2 that I already do, or maybe 3 that I remember. One was rental properties, because that is great on magnitude and passivity in general. Its scale isn't great, but it's very good on magnitude. And then online education businesses, which is great on both scale and magnitude. And then, of course, web apps was another one. So, if you sell a web app that is a subscription service, people pay you $20 a month so that they have access to whatever your app does. That also has the capacity for both scale and magnitude. Overall, this book is fantastic. If you're going to read one finance book in your life, read this book. And if he ticks you off in the first 100 pages, push through. Read it anyway. It's great. This is the one book to read. I really have nothing else to say. I still think it's like worth reading other ones like Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki and Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. Those all have their place in the world. Ramit is pretty good at teaching you to automate your finances for the 21st century. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I still think is the gold standard for understanding the beauty of rental real estate and passive income utilizing rental real estate. So if there's a second one to read, probably that one. And Total Money Makeover is good for if you have a debt issue, I think. And generally, if you want a more less aggressive approach than, say, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a pretty aggressive approach. He over leverages debt, in my opinion. But Dave Ramsey, by comparison, is way too afraid of debt, in my opinion, which also seems to be MJ DeMarco's opinion. Anyway, great book. Check it out. I'll have a link in the description down below. Thanks so much for watching. Hope this was helpful to you, and I'll see you in the next one.